Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. My name is Deja Carrington, and my pronouns are she and her. I am the Vice President of Strategic Communications here at YoungArts. The YoungArts campus is situated on the traditional homeland of the Native nations, including the Tequesta, the Calusa, the Taino, and today the Miccosukee and the Seminole. We pay our respects to the elders, past, present, and future, and recognize their continued existence and contributions to our community. As an organization with staff, teachers, and partners located in all 50 states, multiple US territories, and countries abroad, YoungArts acknowledges that Indigenous peoples are the traditional custodians of all lands. And so now, with this, it is my distinct pleasure to welcome you all to the 2022 National YoungArts Week Plus Educator Experience. For 40 years, YoungArts has been identifying the most accomplished artists in the visual, literary, and performing arts. These artists, many of whom you have taught and helped shape, go on to receive creative and professional development opportunities throughout their entire careers and become part of an artistic community that is nearly 20,000 strong. Now more than ever, we know that artists need support to pursue a life in the arts. And we could not do the work that we do without your support and the support of teachers, instructors, parents, and our wider community. Thank you for your unwavering dedication, guidance, and encouragement, and thank you truly for being with us this evening. So, titled Recruiting for Excellence in a Changing Landscape, tonight's discussion expands on sustaining healthy recruitment for the next generation of artists and arts educators, what leading art schools are looking for in their students, and the evolution of expectations in recent years. I am so very honored and pleased to welcome our speakers, Moderator Carla Hill, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Practitioner and Admissions Associate at Ransom Everglades High School and 1990 YoungArts winner in theater, Francesca Harper, newly named Artistic Director of Ailey 2, founder of the FHP Collective and Francesca Harper Project, and 1987 YoungArts winner in Dance and U.S. Presidential Scholar in the Arts, Dr. Jeffrey S. Hodgson, Provost and Chief Executive Officer of the New World School of the Arts, and Michael McElroy, Chair of the Department of Musical Theater at the University of Michigan, Trustee of the Board, and 1985 YoungArts winner in theater. I can go on and on about these fine folks' accolades, but we will drop the program in the chat so you can learn all about them. And now I will pass the mic to our brilliant moderator, Carla Hill. Thank you, Carla.
Thank you, Deja. And I want to thank YoungArts for always being there for me since I was 18 years old. I love to tell the story about how YoungArts recognized my talent then, and it helped me to really find my tribe. And that's what YoungArts is all about, letting these creative young people know that they're not alone out there, that there are other people who aspire to have a dream in the arts, no matter what level that is. So today I have an esteemed panel of people that I myself am fangirling over and so excited to be with. Let's begin though right away with the program with what we are all thinking about. We're going into our second year, or I'm counting it as 2.5, 3, but 2 years of a pandemic that has really changed the face of the artistic landscape. If we look around, I'm going to guess that many of us in the room have friends or are ourselves artists, and our work has changed. The work for our artists has changed. If you'll recall, before the winter break, there was so much excitement about going and supporting shows in New York, for instance. And then all of a sudden, we were told that this new COVID, Omicron, really has affected the artists and affected those stage works. So sort of like for the artists, we're starting back at almost square one. I don't want to say square one because I feel that by the end of this conversation, we're going to hear a lot of things that will help educators that are with us in the room today and listening all over the world. So let's begin straight away. I want to begin with Francesca and thinking about the audition space. Francesca and maybe Jeffrey and Michael, correct me if I'm wrong. I do believe Francesca and Jeffrey deal with the dance form, the art form of dance. And I'm wondering how that has had to change for you with regard to auditions, audition space. Tell us, Francesca, maybe what Ailey has been going through in terms of encouraging artists and getting that audition for the Ailey space correct in these times when people just can't go into an audition space.
Absolutely. Let me see. Well, like you said, it's wonderful to be here tonight. Thank you. I think the main thing, it's been a few months for me, is I'm a newbie when it comes to my role at Ailey too. But I've been an educator at the school for many years. So that was interesting. And when we went into isolation, there was a group of students that, just weren't allowed. They had been used to kind of being in the studio. And I remember when we first started Ailey 2, we realized that these students really needed a chance. So we held a virtual audition,
Wow.
Which was really, yeah. So that was something we really felt was important, especially in the time, just to kind of out of good faith. And they had been so diligently working,
Yeah.
some of them were the BFA students that have been, they didn't get to graduate or have that experience. So I think Ailey and myself and Lakey Evans Pena felt very strongly about, let's have the Zoom audition. And we actually hired maybe four or five dancers from that Zoom audition, which was we had the audition, we had callbacks, and it was a very arduous process for all of them. But we chose these dancers and they're working with us now. And one other kind of good faith effort that we extended, which is really, I'm just so proud of, because they were on Zoom, we had these apprentices, that usually work, and they kind of donate their time for, to be an apprentice, to work, and to have the experience. Because they had been out freelancing in the field, we really had a discussion and figured out we wanted to pay the apprentices. So we developed 4 paid apprentice positions for Ailey 2.
That is
so they
great.
went from making nothing to and so they found the revenue and the support. And I'm so proud of that we have, we're really paying these beautiful dancers too. So, I think collectively I've really been, very excited and very impressed coming into Ailey, that spirit that I felt growing up as a child around the school, like that mission of just taking care of the community and the people, that's really what motivated all of us in that moment. So
for sure.
Yes.
Thank you so much. That is great. That from what could have been seen as a really negative experience, we turned it into an ability to pay artists to do what they love. I'm going to transition to Jeffrey and Michael. Jeffrey, you are in a unique space where you are helping to supervise not just a high school program, but a college program. And I have a feeling that we have some people who are joining us tonight that are in public school situations, that are in public college situations. Ailey is renowned, and there's a difference when, different funding sources and different public school, definitely having gone to New World School of the Arts, I know that it takes a bit of always reminding people that, hey, we're here and the arts is important. How does a public school, how are you all working within this time to help make sure that recruitment remains steady?
Ever since the beginning of the pandemic, our hashtag was keep creating. And so that creating is not only within our discipline, but in the way that we solve problems. And I just have to give kudos and a shout out to all of the students and the faculty, because they undertook an immense learning curve to make a transition to a virtual environment. And it's incredible what they accomplished. And I think what we've seen is that we're going to use a lot of those things going forward. I think that, especially access to virtual auditions and virtual meet and greets and interviews and those kinds of things have actually opened up a lot of flexibility and accessibility to a number of students. And so what we try to do is to shine them in the best sort of light. I think there's a lot of work that has been happening, especially as you started talking about dance, the classroom setup in a normal school, right? They call it telepresence. And what might work in a math or an English class doesn't work for dancers. So we had to order separate equipment, but we had multiple rooms with that kind of setup, and putting cameras on tripods where the instructor can actually see the students moving. Yes. And so we've done both. That we were in sort of a space where we were doing both in person and online and virtual teaching at the same time. Mm-hmm. We also do have some faculty who needed to be remote. And so we have a studio set up with an extra large screen to try to make that experience as realistic as possible. But it gives the opportunity for a faculty member, and this has been the case with some of our guest choreographers, who can do work from a distance. And so our students have the opportunity to work with outstanding artists, and you bridge that gap without having to deal with air travel and all of that. One of our choreographers too, and I think this is another thing, is just looking at the work on film and what can you do and what can you present in film. One of the pieces that a choreographer did was had the students record all separately, but then they met for a group shoot, and they were masked and outdoors. And again, it's really a matter of creativity in solving those problems.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jeffrey. Appreciate it. Michael, going to your school and your position at the university, what are the challenges that you had to overcome with regard to things like choral ensembles and music programs? Certainly the ability for students to have proper mics, proper lighting, proper equipment. How are you able to keep the fire lit under these students during these times?
Great question, Carla. First of all, just thank you for including me in the space. I want to say that as artists, we are always resilient people. We have to be, right? So we can go from creating a piece of art in someone's backyard to creating something at Carnegie Hall. And so what this moment of the pandemic, along with the civil unrest and the taking of lives across this country, did in that moment was demanded, specifically as teaching artists, as educators, that we step forward in ways that were demanding that we change how we teach, what we teach, how we connect to our students, because our art forms for singing, dancing, acting, they are energy forms that I'm able to understand and to support the student through what I'm seeing and feeling and getting in the space. And that was now gone.
Yeah.
So it took, for me, I am not a person of technology is not my ministry, but I think we all know more about Zoom now than we ever knew before this pandemic. And it demanded of us, and I was teaching vocal performance, which is the acting through song, that I changed my pedagogy. How was I teaching these students? I had to create a whole new series of exercises. But what it did do was it challenged me as a teaching artist to really explore and to interrogate how I teach, what I teach. And what ended up happening was it totally exploded. I was able to explore things in a totally new way that now I'm trying to figure out, how do I do that now that I'm back in the space with all my students? More students worked more often in my class. They all worked every week. So they were growing in different ways. And I think what the technology did for us is it helped us to expand our outreach. So, you know,
Oh, really?
in terms of like, you know, I have an organization that I just, that I founded, and we would do a concert and we'd have, you know, 2 nights of a concert that's 1,200 people. But then all of a sudden we went to virtual concerts, and now we were expanding to 10,000 people around the world were able to have access to our art. So I think in this moment, as we're still navigating the second wave of this pandemic, but as artists and educators, is looking at how we balance the two. I don't think this technology is going to go away, but how can we use it to support us while never forgetting that our art forms depend on the interaction of an audience and the artists, and that energy is something that you can never recreate outside of that one moment, and it's never the same. And it's an essential part of what we do. And so this moment allowed us in many ways to get to know our students in ways that we probably never wanted to. I really was painfully aware of the socioeconomic differences in my classroom between students who were taking classes in huge spaces in their homes to students who had to be in the restrooms, in the bathrooms of their homes. We had to be able to be almost therapists and psychics at the same time to really be able to tune into what we were getting from our students moment to moment, because they were navigating something that they didn't have the tools necessarily to do in a way that was always positive.
Sure.
So
I definitely want to jump in there, Michael, because this hour is going to fly, but you brought up some really great points, and I don't want our visual arts teachers out there to think that I or we have forgotten them, but we can't talk about this pandemic and not bring up what Michael brought up is, you know, this 2020 racial reckoning and these initials, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And as a DEI practitioner myself, I tell people all the time, I say as a creative, we've always been doing this work. DEI is not new in the artistic space. But in doing research for this tonight, and you mentioned another great word, pedagogy, right? We don't think enough, or maybe we're not even thinking that the entire pedagogy and the way that we deal with this next generation really will have to change, because this is their language. Going on to that point, you know, in doing research for tonight, Dr. Hodgson's really talked about something that they had to think about in terms of DEI, in terms of monologues. Can you talk to us a bit, Jeffrey, about what New World School of the Arts, the high school and the college have now considered with regard to us thinking more about equity, inclusion, what you're doing with auditions and monologues in terms of native language?
Yeah, we've looked at, and it's in all of the areas, but I think theater was sort of one of the really hot points and was so important to address. And so the faculty came together and looked at the audition process and how could they address making students feel they're most comfortable. Because one of the things we do at New World School of the Arts is we accept students both in the high school and the college solely based upon talent and the audition. So we don't look at scores, we don't look at SAT, ACT, any of those things. And so when a student comes to us and they haven't worked in a heightened language, they don't have experience with, Shakespeare or whatever, depending on their background. So allowing them to do a monologue in their native language was, or preferred language, whatever is most comfortable, I think was a big step. In dance, we added the same in terms of adding improvisation. And each student has the opportunity to do a 1-minute solo. And we also made it more flexible. So it's not just modern and jazz, but modern and ballet, that it could be jazz, Afro-Caribbean, the wider range. And so what we want students is to feel their most comfortable true self. There's something else I want to mention about in theater, and this also I think we're getting a lot of talk about it in visual arts, but we actually changed the textbook in theater so that theater history is not being taught and focused in a Western European way. The new text really takes a global approach, oral stories, culture, and it's not exclusionary, right? And that's just so important. We've learned so much from this. The other thing I think that's important to point out, I think that's provided once you get students through the door and they're there, right, then is to give them the equal opportunity to perform. And so we've even done double casting of our last show to put more students on stage. In dance, we just felt we had the commitment in the fall that we wanted all of the students to have the opportunity to be on stage. And so we did class projects, both in the high school and the college, sophomore, junior, senior, faculty, choreographer, so that every student in all of those classes would receive some sort of choreography and the opportunity to be on stage. So what we're asking of ourselves is to think in the broadest way of being inclusive and activated.
Sure. And what does that mean? We've been talking a good deal about the performing arts, but what does that mean for our visual artists? Does that mean that there is more accessibility, more acceptance of digital art?
Absolutely. And I think that, the ability, we're seeing our studio teachers, digital art always was there, right, with the graphic designers, but painters, photographers really have had a new digital component that they brought forward. And I think as well, talking about the historical training in visual arts has shifted to again be post-colonial, non-Western in approach. And the other thing that I've seen in visual arts is a real intention using digital access to have special guests, to have people from outside of the normal pathways brought in and connected directly with our students. Actually, we have a series, Artist Scholars and Curators, and it has only featured BIPOC women and underrepresented artists.
Mm-hmm.
It was an intentional choice for the department, and it's something that needs to continue. It's an important first step, but it needs to continue.
Thank you so much for all of the panel. Now, as some of the people that are watching us tonight, they're looking to send their children to your institutions. What is the best advice that we can give the teachers that are here with us now in terms of auditioning in this digital time? How do we prepare them? As Michael brought up, unfortunately, we have discovered, we always knew that there were disparities, with our students, but this pandemic really has showed us the level that those disparities are in. How can we encourage students and their families, quite frankly, to continue on this path of the arts and the auditioning process now in the 21st century? What about the audition has changed, or what are you all considering? What are you looking at? What's new?
Well, what's interesting, I think it's been as as daunting and challenging as it is, what I found really interesting is the opportunity that has arisen from, being able to film dance, and really kind of breaking that down with my dancers and students to say, okay, so we're really looking at this, film, and we're now kind of doing digital auditions, but there's so much power in stillness or behind the eyes or behind like gestures when you have this up close camera, which is something we started looking at and saying, oh my goodness, like, usually you're at the proscenium and you see the dancers and there's this distance between you, but the camera is capturing, this intimacy and this like, and so in some ways through the camera work, we started kind of getting into more nuance and more details, which were actually, it started to kind of feed the dancers and feed the artists and say, oh my goodness, there's something in this kind of minimal gesture, that then leads into the dancer. But I just think, so that was interesting to start to design these auditions or start to design, and bring in their creativity that way and start to be aware of, right, oh no, this is really taking advantage of this camera that has more of this intimate view on the dancer. So I think that was interesting. We would also add some improvisation, like you said, Jeffrey. It's like not your typical auditions anymore, that there's also this desire for kind of personalization in the movement and adding more improvisation so that, people get a better sense of not just the technique, but like what really is behind their artistry and what's important and meaningful to them. And so it was interesting to kind of break down that analysis, but those are some of the elements I think that the dancers really learned and started to include in some of those digital auditions.
Learning a lot more about the necessary equipment. Before it used to be, oh, selfie in this great sunlight, but now I think, no, they need a camera here, they need a camera on the sides. Jeffrey and Michael, have you had to advocate for any of your students? Have you had to send equipment? Have you had to think about their laptops? How do we make sure that we include those students that can't get 3 lights? What have your institutions been able to do, and how can we inspire those teachers that are out there now that are maybe in more remote places that are thinking about how they can support their students' auditions?
Do you want to go first, Michael?
No, go ahead, please.
Okay. So we're really fortunate at New World in that both of our institutions that we're located, we're a tripart, but Miami-Dade County Public Schools and Miami-Dade College both provided free equipment, computers, laptops to students. And there's federal dollars, and I think most school districts have access to that. Now, whether or not that gets down to the faculty and to all of the students in an equal way, I'm not exactly sure, but it's what you're saying really resonates, because we had to take the time to have students learn new technology, and they're fast with it. That's the good news, right? But truly, when we did a online musical performance, and we sent microphones to all of the students, and then one of the professors made a tutorial about how to set it up, where to set it, where to hold your instrument, what's the way to record, for that continuity in that lesson. Something that just happened the other day was that our director in theater called me and said, "Oh my goodness, I just saw this scene. We were rehearsing for this play, and the acting and the immediacy between the students, I was just so blown away by it." And the students were like, "Yeah, we know how to act on camera." And so the reverse is now like, how do you create that intimacy on stage and play in space and time? And so it expands your universe, but you've got to relate it in a new way, and that's an exciting opportunity. I think the importance stands that connections and mentorship make the difference. Whatever a teacher can do to support a student in finding the resource. There's a lot of things that are just online anyway that can help you. And then experimenting and being open and not worrying about making mistakes with it, because it's just a matter of improving and getting better and refining.
Sure. Michael, anything that you all have had to do with regard to supporting students' auditions or those auditioning for you, helping them, letting them know that it's okay? Tell us about the process with your institution.
Well, we really learned a lot over the last couple of years through the audition process of how to audition virtually for the singing portions, for the acting portion, for the dancing portion. And so we send out a whole list of our admissions team sends out a whole list of directions of where the camera should be and how much of your body should be shown, 3/4. I mean, we've got it down. And I think one of the great things about when I talk about having both options, when we started, before we made the shift at the beginning of January, we were going to have a series of auditions in person, and then we were going to keep a series of auditions virtually, because once again, everybody doesn't have the same access or to funds, to the financial access. So we want to make sure that everyone has that opportunity to still be seen. I know when I was teaching at my past university, when we first went into the quarantine, our university made sure that every student had the computer they needed, the microphone they needed, if they needed a ring light, and then for every show that was done, we would ship out, green screens and, ring lights and all that, and then get it shipped back. And so, I mean, we really have, once again, it speaks to artists and the fact that, we are folks who know how to be innovative. I think this moment has challenged us to be much more innovative than we thought, right? And so we're always looking at, what are traditions that should be upheld in our form, and what parts of that should be innovated. And we saw that through not being able to be live. We had to go virtual. So in every part of what we're doing, there is this demand to interrogate what we do and how we do it, so that it is serving this next generation of artists and empowering them to find their authentic voice in the world in which they're living today. And it also challenges us as educators to have to keep looking at what we teach, how we teach, where it comes from, what it stems from, and make sure when we say we're being inclusive, what does that mean? Yes. What does that mean to our curriculum? What does it mean to our language? What does it mean in so many different ways? And so I look at this moment as being probably, as we all do, as being incredibly challenging, but I think it holds potential for being a really amazing turning point in how we live as human beings, as how we engage as artists across all of our fields, and especially within our industry, which has had a light shown on it in a way that has called for many changes. And I'm excited to be a part of this next generation and mentoring and educating them so that they can pick up where we're leaving off, to make sure that our industry, our fields, our artistic disciplines keep moving towards creating more inclusive spaces, keep moving towards celebrating diverse voices in our different fields, keep demanding that our teachers are doing the work and not sitting back and resting on what we've always done. And, and it's uncomfortable, but change is uncomfortable.
Change is uncomfortable. Change is, and I enjoy what you're saying. I almost busted out a tambourine when you were like, Zoom is not my ministry, because it is challenging, but we are, this generation, and my old lady's coming out, I think I agree with you, they are not giving anyone a break. They are very determined in terms of, and a lot of the changes I think that have even happened at my alma mater, New World School of the Arts, is because the students demanded it. The world stopped and we had to look at ourselves. Someone mentioned mentorship when we were talking, and I wonder if each one of you has a suggestion of an organization or a professional organization, somewhere that our teachers, our educators who are with us today can turn to for that help within each of within the performing arts disciplines or visual arts. Any suggestions from our panel?
I just want to mention, I think there's a couple of things. I mean, there's organizations, specifically to each discipline, National Dance Educators, for example, that sort of thing. We just hosted National Portfolio Day. Those things are all that provide access and connections. I think one of the biggest turning points for me was an online class I took in micro messaging, and
Messaging, wow.
oh boy, was that a reset for me. Understanding, I just had to rethink all the ways that I was taught and all of the cues. So, right, we're artists. We're all used to criticism, right? We give criticism, we give corrections, we give changes, right? But how to give micro affirmations, how to give things that point people in the right direction instead of taking away from them.
Mm-hmm.
And
what organization provided that?
It was NAPE, the National Alliance for Partnerships in Equity.
Wow.
And that came about because it was actually a high school, it was an MDCPS program, and they're connected with public schools. So I think there's training available connecting that through public schools with that organization. But there's a lot of groups out there. I know a bunch of our faculty have done with the Adway group, Whiteness at Work training.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And there's lots more.
And if anyone out there is with a private school, the National Association of Independent Schools has a very big commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and has weekly meetings with faculty of color or heads of school of color. So look out for that with private schools. Anyone else have any suggestions of professional organizations or school organizations that our guests can tune into? Because that's one of the changes that has happened during this pandemic, is that there's so many more workshops that are available online, rather than a trip to wherever and you've got to beg your boss, well, it's worth it and I need 2 plane tickets, or et cetera, et cetera. And then after that, I want to make sure that we get into some questions, some really good questions that have been brought up. But anyone else have any suggestions of where people can turn to for support?
I just had one. Being at Michigan, they offer a lot of courses on equity, diversity, inclusion, accessibility, belonging, and we can take as many or as little as we want. I, of course, have tried to take them all, but one that really changed things for me was trauma-informed teaching.
Wow.
One of the things that really, and you can go online and there are people who teach this course, but it's asking us, given the pandemic and given all the things that have happened in the last couple of years, we no longer can just teach the minds of young people. We have to teach the whole person. Mm-hmm. And it is acknowledging that our bodies carry this trauma that has happened over the last couple of years, and because of the art forms that we engage, that comes into the room with us, with our students. And so understanding how to help dismantle, recognize, develop tools in order to engage, so that it doesn't become something that then requires teachers to step into spaces of therapy and all that, that we're not trained to do. So there are lots of different training programs that you can find through universities, through different organizations, different arts organizations. There are a lot of, I just do your research because they're all out there. And I think, especially for this younger generation, it's important to know how we meet them where they are, because they're in a totally different place. Even though we've engaged the same things, they're responding to it in a very different way.
Agreed. Thank you so much for that, Michael. Francesca, any thoughts before we go to some questions?
Oh, well, I follow all of that. Wonderful. I mean, there've just been, I think online is really what you were saying, this has turned into such a resource center, being online and being able to access. I've just been so impressed by how many people are holding these conversations. I've found this kind of influx of like conversations, artists, and just having, I think on Instagram, these pop-up conversations that are very much to support and to kind of enhance or inspire to keep your community alive. And I think that that's also something, is just really reaching out to friends as much as it's been a real learning curve for us to just have to start to reach out through the internet. But I think now that, that we've started doing it, there have just been, I'll see even on my Instagram feed or on Facebook, there are just these wonderful people going live. I saw something in Netherlands Dance Theater today went live, and I was just walking through the Netherlands Dance Theater with one of the dancers and watching them, it was just really remarkable. But that's what you're saying, Michael, right? We have to kind of participate and be a part of where they are and how. So I think that's it also, just like shifting from being in person and being online, but really being actively, seeking out and actively involved with your friends and seeking out all of these wonderful events that people are curating.
Thank you so much, Francesca. There's a great question for the panel that is one that we were going to talk about with relation to careers in the arts. This person says, given the instability of arts jobs and activities over the past 2 years, does the panel feel fewer students will want to become professional musicians and artists as a career choice? Or do you think that the industry is going to restabilize? What are the panel's thoughts on that? I mean, today's discussion is about keeping the dream alive, right? And the recruitment of these artists. I hope they still want to dream and be artists. Francesca, please go ahead.
Well, I will tell you, it's been a very strange, wonderful ride for me because, I have been kind of plugging along and doing my own thing for a long time. And when the pandemic hit, I had been interested in filmmaking and creating before, and I had done some films on my own, but I ended up just getting like a lot of these commissions to make films because people kind of knew that I had this multiplicity and this hybridity, which I had really learned from working with William Forsythe in Frankfurt Ballet. It was like, he just kind of pulled us out of our comfort zone. We would dance on point 1 minute, or I'd have some text to say or sing or whatever it was. So that was also, and that was different, having been trained at very strong dance institutions, Alvin Ailey, School of American Ballet, Joffrey. So that really opened up my mind. So when the pandemic hit, I started kind of reigniting my passion for filmmaking and sharing that with my students and, and creating, and thinking, kind of introducing this way of, oh, you're a dancer, but you can write some text and dance to a monologue and your poetry.
So letting them know that they are.
So I think that was it. It was like kind of just encouraging them to think outside of the box and to think in this kind of hybridity, this language that actually you can quickly pivot. I think I'm so thankful for William Forsythe kind of introducing, well, Fran, why wouldn't you just take this text and go out and read it on stage? You rehearse it and you do it and then you can do it. So I think that was an interesting asset, I think, that I was able to kind of encourage other dancers to think, some of them made their own films and wrote back to me like, look at this short film. What do you think? Does it work for you? And, so we had these dialogues and exchanges. So I think that was one thing that's one thing I would love to share, is just how there are opportunities if we, like you said, take workshops or start to expand or dip our toes into other art forms, that how quickly you can, from your experience and what almost translate.
And then also, as educators, introduce these things to our students, because as we mentioned earlier, they can have this wonder, I don't know, called Baryshnikov can do a master class now on Zoom. And, I'm thinking about him as a multidisciplinary artist as he transitioned into different things later in his career. Because around our age, a dancer is a dancer is a dancer, and all that other stuff.
Great example,
performance art, but it is
it all is.
You have to think about yourself like that.
That's right.
Yeah, Jeffrey and Michael. What about this thought about jobs and activities in the arts. Are you seeing fewer students, or how are you continuing to nurture?
I think we're seeing more. I think that students are hungry for a place to activate their voice. I know in my institution, we have a very small class size for each year. Each class is about 20 to 22 students in each class. And I know that for our freshman class that was all auditioned on Zoom, all in virtual, we accepted, I think the percentage was 1.6% of those who auditioned.
Wow.
So if anything, the students are hungry. My thing is, how do we channel that, right? How do we channel that energy, that rage, that joy, that voice, through rigor, through seeing them, celebrating them, challenging them, so that they can take our art forms to the next level that only they can do. That we brought it this far, we'll give you what we have, we'll grow and change as teaching art educators, and then it's yours. And so I think that art is one of the few places that young people can actually be seen and feel like they can find their group. That's what I found at YoungArts. Every time I was on the panel there, was that I watched this group of 21 high school students go from sitting there on the first day when we say, oh, just wait, by the end of the week, you're gonna be this family, and they'd give us the side eye, like, yeah, really. And then like 5 days in, those students are still talking to each other 5, 10, 20 years later, because you create this, you find the people who think like you and who are passionate like you and who believe in the art like you and inspire you. And so I think we're going to just see more and more, and we just have to be ready for what they're bringing, because they're bringing something totally different into the space.
Absolutely.
So I just think we need to be ready for it.
I think our responsibility in an institution then is to broaden what we do in our approach and not be stuck into the way that we used to do it. We've had to reimagine our performances. Carla, the world is, when you're at New World, the world is your stage, right? On the Metro rail.
Yes, that's right. We really, I tell people, I say, the movie Fame, that was my life, and they think I'm exaggerating, but it was.
Yeah.
Something that Kenneth Williams, thanks for joining us. What efforts are each of your institutions doing to ensure that geography isn't a barrier? For every, we kind of have this coastal thinking in the arts sometimes. But what are we doing to make sure that students in rural communities and not on the coast, that are sort of in the flyover areas, that they are served in the same way that kids in the city are?
That touches me so much, because I grew up in the middle of South Dakota in a town of 1,000 people, and had to drive 2 hours each way for piano lessons.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that. South Dakota, to someone in Miami, that sounds so exotic.
And I think about, and it's a good question. I think you're prompting me to think about how do we reach out to those schools and those teachers and maybe make a connection with a certain area or a group where we connect them with resources. So again, there is the possibility through this digital connection to do more in that realm. And I hadn't really thought, I know maybe a lot of the educators here tonight, or that have their kids coming to YoungArts, are going that extra mile. But I'm going to make a conscious effort to do the same thing as well.
Thank you. Anyone else want to comment on how they have been thinking about reaching out to other students in not coastal areas?
Power of social media. This generation, they love themselves. Once again, not my ministry, but I'm learning. I've learned the Instagrams. I still haven't learned the Twitters and the other stuff, but we put a lot of time and energy in our program into our Instagram and our social media, because that's how students, That's how they communicate. And so we want to get the word out. And also by bringing in more diverse voices and artists and lived experiences into the space, you're actually also messaging that there's a place for people there, right? And seeing people, someone was saying the other day, you can see it, you can be it. It's making sure that we are doing our role, our responsibility as arts institutions to make sure that there's diversity in our faculty, in the guest artists, the directors, the people that come in, so that we don't just audition diverse groups of students in and they come in and they see nobody who looks like them, but we're making sure that we are supporting them and knowing that it is possible, not just by the training, but by who they get to come in contact with. So messaging that across the country, not just on the East Coast and the West Coast, but making sure that they know that there are people here who look like them, who are at a certain level of excellence, and that there is a place for them here. So social media has been one of our biggest ways of doing that.
Fantastic. I think that Francesca, I don't mean to jump in. I'm looking at the time and people are interested in how you all are handling auditions. We talked a little bit about that, but Francesca, maybe I can start with you this time. Those new young dancers looking to, it used to be a summer with Ailey too. So what is that going to look like for those kids out there? And then also Jeffrey and Michael, talk about how you're handling auditions. That was a question that came up. People are very interested.
Absolutely. I mean, I am, like I said, I am a film buff, filmmaker. I love kind of editing. And one of the things I think being a new person here, I think Ailey is also really excited about becoming a hybrid organization. So we're really also, like Michael was saying, we're really kind of buffering up our Ailey All Access and, creating workshops that are available online and really fun. Judith Jamison did one and it was open to the public. And so that's really one thing that we're really actively going to be curating this next season. It's also my first, season of kind of choosing, the programming or designing it. And so I think this is our new world. It's this hybrid world that we're offering workshops, and we're really looking. I can now, after all my experience, really, I'm able to kind of discern and pull away artistry. And I have a good acute eye for, seeing so much more through a video audition, so yeah, it's become part of our norm now. So yeah, we're really actively thinking of new programs that we can present in the digital world.
And then there's a great question that has come up. Are we also letting artists know that they can still be creatives and also teach? Because we need creatives to get out there and teach. You, Francesca, are a great example. Michael is a great example of someone who is teaching and working. How do we convince our students that education is also a viable option for them? Or Jeffrey, is New World is New World kind of also letting students know that teaching still allows them to be creative people?
Yeah, absolutely. I was looking at the chat and the concern about finding drama or music teachers. I know that this is a challenge, especially to find people with that experience, but that can also bridge that educational gap. And it's something that we try to mentor here specifically, and do a lot of mentorship programs among students. And so that they're having that exchange and that sense of unity, of working together, in addition to pedagogy classes and all of those kinds of things. But I think it's important to really emphasize this, and to find, because there are those students who really are drawn to not only being able to express themselves, but helping others to go down that same path. And I just think that that's critical. I don't know that there's a shortage of it or that there's a stoppage. That could be regional. I think we're very blessed in Miami because we have a lot of working artists, and that happens in a lot of the big centers. But I see a lot of the regional community too, have a lot of talent. You've got to reach out to local dance schools or dance studios, the regional theater companies, and get connected with those artists, because a lot of times there are some of those people lurking around that would be great educators, and we need to pull them in.
That's true. I think one of the most inspiring things is the fact that, everyone on this panel, all of your institutions uses working artists. No one is just a teacher. Everyone is out there working. I know that as a student at New World, it was, I thought my teachers were rock stars when I could actually go to a playhouse and see them actually doing what they taught me. So the more that we are able to show the students that, that's so important. There was a question about prepping students for Young Arts, and I just wanted to point out that the education@youngarts.org email is in the chat, and Young Arts would love to partner with you or whoever you are out there and offer presentations, information sessions, and any resources that you need to help them to help students realize the opportunity that is there with Young Arts. And Young Arts is, they're pivoting too, so they can do it virtually for you. So please reach out to them at education@youngarts.org. And one of the things I would say is share that email with other colleagues who are in the arts as well, people that may not know about Young Arts out in those areas that need to be reached, because there's someone like a Jeffrey Hodgson driving 2 hours for their piano lesson, and we want to reach them as well. Before we go, Silas Hoover, hello, Silas, thanks for being with us. Wondered the panel's thoughts on some national initiatives like the Creative Economy Revitalization Act, or the Arts Education for All Act, or are there any local or regional initiatives that you all would recommend or want to talk about before we go tonight?
Just because I just got the email, Bank of America Foundation has lots of support for arts and education, and have a very specific grant opportunity for that. I think there are a lot of resources, and if you don't have the experience in sourcing those and finding them, is to do some work and some investigation to do that, and even find, look for a grant writer in your area that knows how to do that research and that can connect you and find out those points where you connect. I'm not as familiar with the legislation because I don't know that that's gone through, but I hope those efforts continue, because that's, important for all of us. I will say that what we've done as educational institutes is try to take the pandemic relief money and make it work for us in whatever way is possible. And I appreciate our institutions for their support in that.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Michael or Francesca, any thoughts on the initiatives that were mentioned, or anything that you're working on that is helping your organizations?
Well, I would say I'm just as a kind of a freelance choreographer and creator. I mean, having these kind of COVID relief funds were really helpful for me. I actually got the loan, for my company. That was really wonderful. It just helped so much, and they're really out there. And some of them are actually just in your inbox and you're not aware of that. If you really go through the application process, that you can have support. And so I think there's so many that the government is also even sponsoring that people can be aware of. I just highly recommend even just doing some research online to find out what initiatives are available. Mm-hmm.
And I would also, just to add to that, a shameless plug, but I'm, a lifelong member of Young Arts family. And in the time when our community and our industry shut down and people fled, and the actors and artists were out there just trying to figure out what they could do, how they could survive, There were few national organizations that were picking up the mantle and saying, I'm going to support these artists in this moment. In New York, it was, Broadway Cares, Equity Fights AIDS, and the Actors Fund of America. But I know YoungArts and the micro grants that they gave any alum that requested them, that kind of support in that time was the difference, made all the difference in the world. And so I just want to celebrate, and that's why I'm honored to be a part of the YoungArts family, but also just to go back to one of the initiatives that's there and to say that arts education in high school, in public schools, is the reason why I'm here today. And it is essential that we make sure that we're supporting young artists from the time that they're able to walk, so that they're able to have that access and pipelines into some of these arts programs that are there today. Lots of these things you can't get in if you don't start when you're young. And so I think the more support we can give, not only to arts initiatives for young kids, but to the teachers that teach them, is absolutely essential. So I just wanted to just have my little shameless plug, because I'm a young arts person through and through, from being a 17-year-old scared kid who came down to Miami, to being a panelist, to chairing a panel, to now serving on the board. This organization changes lives and is there for the artists from the time that they come in until for as long as you want to be a part of. So I just want to celebrate them and these opportunities that they offer to arts educators to have these kind of conversations.
Oh, thank you, Michael. Thank you, Jeffrey. Thank you, Francesca. That's the perfect segue to send it back over to just a wonderful supporter of the arts, her professional life, her personal life, Ms. Deja Carrington. Thank you so much for having all of us here tonight and supporting teachers as YoungArts has always done throughout the years.
Wow, Carla, Michael, Jeffrey, Francesca, thank you, thank you, thank you so much. And thank all of you for joining this evening. We asked earlier in the chat where you're coming from. We got chilly Long Island, Lawrence, Kansas, Oakland, California. So thank you for being here. I'd be remiss if I also didn't thank the YoungArts staff, many of whom joined us this evening and who have been in overdrive all month, not only for this educator experience, but for an intensive week of mentorship, creative process and development, and who are in full preparation for next week, which will be open to the public, a full week of public performances. So in just 2 days, we will be introducing you to the 2022 YoungArts Competitional finalists in a series of virtual performances, writers' readings, exhibitions, and more. So tune in every night. Clear your schedule next week, January 29th, all the way to February 4th, every night, 8 p.m. Eastern on youngarts.org. Tune in to meet the next generation of young artists who you all have been supporting and helping to shape. So can't thank you all enough. And we look forward to seeing you on Saturday night at youngarts.org.